Last evening there was a terrific show on Frontline on PBS called Poisoned Waters. And one of the issues raised there was that there are a number of pollutants to water that we don't even know how to measure yet or what the dangerous levels are. And I'm interested in both of your responses to the idea that we should be pursuing these and regulating them further.
Who wants to start?
Well, you're right. It's an excellent program. I hope they re-air it. There's a new recognition. Again, if you think about the basin as a system, and then if you think about the system, the in-house 500-gallon system that Tim described as a self-contained system, we're discovering that all kinds of things are winding up in our water because water is in everything we consume. And then it comes out of us and goes back into the water. And the biggest one that's catching people's attention right now, the caffeine in our coffee goes into the water. Caffeine levels are rising in water supplies. Estrogen levels are rising in water supplies because of birth control pills. And they are beginning to damage the fish populations. Now, there was a time, we talk a lot. We recognize that mercury is a problem. And we recognize it's a problem because 3 decades ago in Japan, there was a town that was nearly decimated because of the amount of mercury that got into the water. You measured the water, it wasn't that bad, but the fish were eating the plant life that had mercury in it, and then bigger fish ate those fish, and bigger fish ate those fish, so the concentrations got really intense. We're now beginning to see those same kinds of concentrations happen with pharmacology. Whenever you have a prescription drug, and if you don't use all of it, it used to be flush it down the toilet. Don't ever do that. The antibiotic level is rising in our water. And as the antibiotic level rises in our water, our resistance to certain pathogens goes down. So yes, these are very, very serious issues, and I would hazard to say that within a decade they will be recognized as being as serious as dealing with arsenic and mercury and other heavy metals.
I'm sorry I didn't catch the show. I was driving back on my traditional drive from Columbus last night and enjoying the rainstorm. But there's 3 issues here that we need to focus on. Science, technology, and education. And Chris sort of hit them. I mean, to the extent we have humans who will be excreting things that they take in, it's going to get into the system. We need to have a better method of determining, and to the extent we have industry that's still discharging some things, some of it's still getting into the system. We need to do a better job, I think, using science, and advancements in science will help us in deciding what are the things we should be prioritizing to keep out of the system and what levels are acceptable, what's not. Then you need to get the technology to help keep them from getting into the system. And then the third part is the education, and Chris really hit that one, this issue that people need to know better, what you shouldn't be. You think you flush something down the toilet, you got to remember where that goes. People have a tendency to forget. For those of us who are on septic systems, we know it's going to go into our water table at some point, so I think that's a self-concern. But for those who are using the public system, I know the regional sewers here, even despite your best efforts, there's only so much that you can handle. So I think those 3 need to become focus points. And again, I mean, I think you give incentives to industry to try to focus on that through the public system first, and when that fails, then you may have to increase the public enforcement.
And if I'm just correct to make it clear, that metabolites of pharmaceutical drugs that we ingest are not currently removed from a typical wastewater treatment plant. But does the technology exist for that to happen currently, or is it something that it's going to take a while to develop?
Well, awareness of the problem is only very recent. So there certainly aren't any wide-scale deployed, commercially ready systems for removing these types of contaminants. This is still very much at the research stage of recognizing, to your point, what's a threshold that's acceptable, what's a threshold that's not acceptable, and then what are the mechanisms for removal.
Okay.
I was just wondering, when you guys said something about the 500-gallon tank in front of your yard, I was wondering if it would lower your bill, or would you still have to pay a water bill, or would your water bill be higher?
That's an excellent question. Actually, you would have The only water bill you would have was the cost of that first 500 gallons. If you bought it from a water company, whatever they charged you, if you had it brought in from the city system, whatever they charged you. Once you're in the system, you're not going to, at least according to these scientists, need more water because you will add other liquids to the system and self-proliferate. If you have to get a little more water, you have to pay for the additional water that you might add once in a while. Where your costs are, though, is the system today, because it's estimated, the initial cost would be somewhere in the area of $50,000. How does that compare? Well, to those of us who live in the country, a septic system and a well on the old days would cost you about $25,000 to $30,000. So under the new rules that may be back into effect in July, it costs you $50,000 for the water well and the septic system. So you may break even. The long-term cost is, though, you wouldn't be paying for any more water. Your only cost would be the maintenance of the system to keep it operating. I think this technology is on the horizon, though. I really do. I think, and Chris mentioned it before, I think we have two ways of dealing with things, using a big central system. And by the way, we lose a lot of water from the point it leaves Lake Erie to the time it gets to the tap over here at the City Club. There's water loss in the system. Under that system, your water loss would be greatly reduced.
Actually, this was something Gretchen and I had been talking about. There are not many businesses I know, and as a recovering venture capitalist, I've spent a lot of time dealing with businesses. But there's no business that could ever come to me and say, well, we make the product, and we put it on the truck, and we send the truck out, and somewhere between the time we send the truck out and it gets to the store, half the product falls off the truck. We don't really know where, but we lose it. But at any rate, half of it gets to the store. That's the way water works today. In the United States alone, the infrastructure, and this is one of the things, getting people aware, the public outreach and education issue is critical. Getting people aware of this is essential. There's over 1 million miles of pipe in the United States and Canada alone for transporting water. That's enough to go around the earth 40 times. So when you realize that, the fact that the question almost is, why are they only losing half? Some of these pipes are 150 years old. So we have an incredible infrastructure issue right now. In the President's stimulus program, there was a lot of talk about infrastructure, and a lot of it is about roads and bridges. And that's because those are really highly visible. And people like to be able to point to those and say, see, I did that. And this is not a slam against any politician. It's human nature. I'm sure Senator Grendell would much rather have the Senator Tim Grendell Bridge than the Senator Tim Grendell wastewater treatment facility or sewer pipeline.
Although there's some people who might want to name one of those.
So it's the challenge is in getting this stuff that's all hidden and underground and out of sight into our psyche, into our awareness, and into our behaviors.
But Senator Grendell, you can be the first then to have that named after you. So. Well,
actually, I've been involved in the septic issue for the last 2 years, and they refer to me now as the septic senator, which I'm.
I have a quick question for you, actually, on this recycling plant. Why is it that you can't just collect rainwater and do it that way, as opposed to having any 500 gallons piped in at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, you could. You could have a cistern then that also would feed the system. That's an excellent point. You could have a cistern feeding into the system because it's going to go through the treatment facility. But the problem is the system is set up, so you know, to handle the 500 gallons. Not 600 gallons on a rainy day, but 500 gallons. So your system would have to be a backup that you could then tap into as you needed additional water. But the system is pretty balanced on that 500 gallon number.
You know,